So, at the moment of me editing this video, it's been almost 2 months since the last Minecraft Live. I really wanted to at least give myself some time to get used to this new format of it all, along with the new game drops and also how things have gone without there being a mob vote. And I'm not gonna lie, I've had a lot of mixed feelings over the whole thing. In fact, the mob vote is probably coming back, but I'll explain that more later in the video. I'm sure a lot of people already know what I'm talking about with the mob vote. Sure, it was controversial for a lot of people, but at least at the beginning of it, it was just a really cool time where the whole community got together to actually participate in voting for a feature. Usually a mob, but sometimes an entire biome, and then that feature would be added to the game. At the time, no game has ever done that, and still to my knowledge, I don't think any game has. I could be wrong on that, but sure, the mob vote had its problems. It certainly wasn't perfect, but I don't know, it's just something about it still made it all worth it in my opinion. There's really a lot of psychology and understanding of the human heart that I feel like doesn't really get talked about when looking at how the mob vote went. Most people just kind of talk about it being unfair, or more from the perspective of a player playing the game, but there's really an overlooked psychological aspect to it that I want to try to explore in this video. So, I present to you all the dark truth about Minecraft's mob vote removal. So before we can understand the psychology behind this, I just like to make it very clear and make a disclaimer here that I'm not a real psychologist. I don't have a degree, but I've been obsessed with studying topics in that field ever since I was in middle school. And no, I'm not going to be going super technical into the idea. It's more just going to be about vibes. So I really want people to have an open mind when watching, because most of what I'll be saying will just be from my own experiences or what I think other people might be feeling. So with that out of the way, let's set the stage here, because I think it's important that we look at the mob vote not as one gigantic thing, but as multiple different events that took place over the course of 6 years. I've been playing Minecraft for almost 15 years. God, I'm old. But back in the day, when Minecraft did updates, they usually just did the same things that most other game companies did at that time. They made trailers for their updates, which were really cool. Looking back on them now, they really just used in-game footage a lot more than most of the Minecraft trailers we see now. Minecraft has also been holding official conventions since 2011, featuring exciting events and the developers showing up to answer questions from fans and announcing the next updates. But at some point, someone had the bright idea to change the way Minecon worked. So instead of it being a local convention held in different cities every year, it became a live streamed event so that it could be broadcasted simultaneously worldwide. So now, Minecon, later renamed to Minecon Earth, became this anticipated event that everyone was waiting for, and it became the household name it is today, going from Minecon Earth to Minecon Live to Minecraft Live. But something else was going to happen at this event that was a first in Minecraft's history. Will Arnett was going to host it. I'm just kidding. Of course it was the mob vote. Basically a way for the developers to pitch 4 different mobs that they had created the idea for, and the community would vote on which one would get added to the next update. And the ones that didn't win the vote would be lost forever, never to be added to Minecraft again. Little did the developers realize the repercussions of what they were doing. This event would set a fire so hot that it would forever singe the community with one of the biggest traumas in all of gaming history. The mobs from the first vote were a jellyfish monster that would live in the water, and if you encountered it, it would drag you down into the ocean and try to drown you. Then there was the mob that everyone is familiar with because it won, the Phantom, which at the time was described as a manta ray that flew in the air and would appear to attack players who didn't sleep for many days. Many days. Which apparently, demojang, many just equals 3. The third mob was a giant mouth with legs that would hide in the ground and bite things that fell in. Also, for some reason, being so hungry that it could eat the enchantments off of your armor or tools. Weird that it didn't just eat the object as well. And the last mob was something that lived in the nether, and that was like a more powered up blaze that would fly over lava lakes and would team up with smaller blazes, and it had shields to protect itself, and it could also do a shockwave attack. I remember watching these separate videos explaining what the mobs would do. Immediately, I hated the idea of the bigger blaze, as that thing sounded way too overpowered. And I hated the idea of the jellyfish that tries to drown you, as I liked the concept but could easily see how annoying that would get. My vote was split between the Phantom and the Big Mouth guy. And while I enjoy the idea of the Big Mouth guy being able to spawn in the overworld, so, we'd be able to just see it, I thought about how niche its ability was. Ultimately, because that mob had lost, later on, there was an item that would do the exact same thing, and to this day, I still don't use it. The Phantom to me was something I liked because it sort of gave off a horror element. Kind of like that this is some sort of curse you got from not sleeping often. And I was really right about the horror element, as once they were shown off for the first time, hearing that scream, whew, I was spooked just imagining hearing that at night and panicking looking around to see where it would swoop at me from. I think a lot of people maybe expected that the Phantom was not going to be showing up that often, as the developers were quite vague about it. And while I can understand that a lot of players really hate it nowadays, I actually don't. I don't think I've ever died to a Phantom. They really don't hit you that hard. Even without armor, whenever one of them attacks you, it just takes away like 1 heart on normal or 1.5 hearts on hard. I do just like how their hitbox is kind of hard to hit sometimes, but it's still killable once you get the hang of it. Plus the drop that it gives makes one of the best potions in the game in my opinion. So I still love the Phantom even to this day and do not regret it being the winner of the first mob vote. And it's at this point that you kind of get the gist of it all. Each year, Mojang would announce a new feature vote, but instead of there being 4 choices like in the first one, there would be 3. And they continue to rely on this premise, at least for the mob votes, that only one can survive and the other ones would be lost forever. And people really started to hate this concept after a while. But apparently this sentiment wasn't really that popular in the beginning, which makes sense because after the first mob vote in 2017, the next 2 years focused on voting for different biomes. In 2018, the vote was between the taiga, which would add foxes, campfires, and sweet berries, the desert, which would add palm trees, meerkats, and oases, and the savanna, which would add baobab trees, termites, and ostriches, in which the taiga won. And in 2019, the vote was between the badlands, which would add tumbleweeds, vultures, and a new type of cactus, the swamp, which would add boats with chests, frogs, and mangrove trees, and the mountains, which would add powder snow, goats, and improved mountain terrain generation, which of course the mountains won that one. There was a mob vote that occurred only in China in 2018, but it was actually a prediction vote for which mob was going to be added, with the winner being the giant panda, so it's not really regarded as a real mob vote since the vote didn't actually affect the game development at all. The difference between the mob votes and the biome votes, however, were one of the problems that would persist over the years and boil over. In the mob votes, only one could win, the others would never be added to the game, ever. While in the biome votes, one of them could win, but the others would all come to the game at some point later in time, as we would see proof of this happening in 2022 during the release of the Wild update. They added frogs, the mangrove tree, the mangrove swamp, and boats with chests. There was something that was strange that the community just didn't seem to want to accept. Why in the mob vote did the losers have to be gone forever? It's clear that Mojang had the ability in the biome votes to announce that the biomes that lost would come to the game eventually. If coding and designing one individual mob was a lot smaller than an entire feature that overhauls an entire biome, which adds items, trees, and other mobs, then why is it that Mojang still insisted that the losing mobs not even be considered for a future update? A sentiment that would be overturned a lot later, but we'll get there, don't you worry about that. I think the reason that I genuinely felt annoyed with the way Mojang handled the mob vote is more just the lack of communication. I feel like most of the time Mojang kind of swept it under the rug and refused to comment on why the losing mobs of the mob votes had to go, which of course enraged the community even more, I imagine, especially since this was really the only thing about Minecraft that was so personal to them, because they usually fell in love with the mob that they picked, only to see it lose and then snatched away from them to be tossed into the void, discarded, and forgotten. If you think about it from the perspective of a player who voted, it is quite mean-spirited for a company that makes billions of dollars off of the money that players give to the company to hype up the players for a new feature only to then tear it away from them at the last second. But if you think about the game developer's perspective, they're probably working very, very hard on that entire update to give us players, for free by the way. Adding all of the mobs or even promise that the older mobs can come back would just be much more work for them. And sure, you might think, well, it's no biggie to add them because it's a much smaller feature than the other things in the large update, but also we can't see their work schedule, so we can't really be sure that giving them the task of working on all 3 mobs wouldn't just break them, as evidence of the idea that even one mob being put in from the mob vote already seems like it's way too much for them to handle, because there are lots of bugs and changes that come with it when it's released. The Allay and Sniffer having changes that took place in 6 different snapshots, and the Glow Squid and the Armadillo took 4. But we're getting a little ahead of ourselves, so after the biome votes, there were 4 mob votes, until they ultimately canceled the mob vote entirely after there was so much backlash from the community. No one can really say if it was just due to the backlash or something else, but I definitely think that the mob vote was something that they were tired of getting so much hate from. The 4 mob votes were a squid that would light up underwater, a cow with flowers growing out of it, and a frostbitten illager that dropped an iceberg on top of you. Then there was a vote for a floating piece of moss that would notify you when there was too much darkness, a flying fairy that would pick up dropped items and give it back to you, and a copper statue that would walk around pushing buttons randomly. After that there was a vote for a big furry creature that would dig for ancient seeds, a hunchback guy that you could play hide and seek with in the cave for a small gift, and another statue, but this one could display an item for you. And the last mob vote was a crab that with its crab claw allowed you to place blocks from further away, an armadillo that would shed pieces of its shell for you to craft armor for your dogs, and a penguin that when near your boat in the water will make your boat go faster. I'm sure just like in the first mob vote, there were other abilities that the losing mobs would have had, as that happened with the glow squid, which didn't technically light up the ocean as they said it would, but it still glowed, but also dropped glow ink, which could be used to brighten the text on signs, and the armadillo also apparently when rolled up into a ball can scare spiders and cave spiders. The thing is that with each one of these mob votes, they would be entangled in some sort of controversy, which would further drive a wedge between the community and the developers, and each time there was a mob vote, you could expect that there would be a wave of haters that would clown on Mojang for still continuing the mob vote despite all the backlash. In 2020, while we were all inside during that time, the mob vote where the glow squid won was how it all started. See, during that time, these votes were held on Twitter. This was back before Elon ruined it, so many large YouTubers who wanted to vote for their favorite mob went on Twitter and urged their fans to vote for them as well. One of these people was the gigantic YouTuber Dream. He made a post asking his followers to vote for it, but it wasn't just him. A lot of other YouTubers did that as well, like Mr. Beast, Fwip, Mythical Sausage, Filza, Bad Boy Halo, and Fundy. Although, arguably, Captain Sparkles did the same thing with the Iceologer, and he and Dream had about the same Twitter presence, so at the end of the day, none of those people were really responsible for the Glow Squid winning. The YouTuber Retro Gaming Now made a really great video about this that goes way more into depth about the situation if you're interested. But Mojang still got a lot of backlash, and so did Dream as well for some reason, as he's the only one that people blame nowadays. But you'd think Minecraft would learn from their mistakes, right? No. The next mob vote was also on Twitter in 2021. It was the mob vote where the LA won. Now, to be fair, this mob vote at the time wasn't controversial. In fact, I think a lot of content creators learned just how bad things could get, so most of them had disclaimers when talking about the mob vote or just didn't mention it at all. But then in 2022, they finally learned their lesson, and this year's mob vote will be voted on by loading up the Minecraft game itself. You could either vote on Bedrock by accessing a game server, or vote in the Minecraft launcher, or on the Minecraft.net website. They also had a 24-hour period that you could vote versus how in the previous ones, you basically had to vote while the Minecraft live stream was happening, and at the end of the event, they would announce the winners. But for some reason this time, when we got the results, the Sniffer won with a voting percentage of more than half, and a lot of people were speculating that somehow Mojang themselves must have rigged this, or maybe they designed the other mobs so poorly that there was only one obvious answer to pick, and that angered a lot of people, even though there really wasn't enough evidence to back it up. And then we get to 2023 with the final mob vote, although not the final controversy, but this time the Armadillo won, and a lot of people were, again, angry. So surprising, right? This vote was done the same way as the previous year, so there wasn't any large influencers trying to sway their audiences, but a lot of people took polls of their own audiences, and from the looks of it, a lot of people were thinking that the crab was going to win this one because of how many polls they saw from large YouTubers where the crab had actually won. But instead, the Armadillo ended up winning. This sent the community into a spiral so bad that it would unleash a war between the crab voters and the Armadillo voters. So much hate and death threats came from that, mainly because each side loved their mob so much they couldn't believe that it had lost. And then we all found out that during this time that the mob vote itself was actually hacked. So this spread a lot of rumors around the internet that the results were illegitimate. And Mojang themselves even addressed this, stating that yes, it did happen, but they stopped it before it could do any damage. So a lot of community just had to take their word for it. But the damage had already been done. There was actually a change.org petition that was set up titled "Stop the Mob Vote," put an end to the scrapping of great ideas, and it got over 500,000 signatures. It's possible that Mojang was also influenced by this petition, shocked at how many signatures it got and how much buzz it generated, that maybe their PR team was like, yeah, we should probably stop the mob vote. I'll discuss this next controversy in a second, but currently we are analyzing the mindset of what people felt after the mob vote was actually cancelled. Me personally, I had changed my opinion on it a lot over the years. During the first mob vote, I felt so happy that I could participate, and I didn't really have any remorse for the mobs who lost. Maybe it was because at the time, the mobs were just concept drawings, and later on in the newer mob votes, all the mobs were animated and cute and interesting. There was a lot of effort put into making them as appealing as ever. In every mob vote, the mob that I voted for won, except for the dang glow squid Chillager for life. Yo, for me, I mostly saw it from the perspective of the winner, so I always felt validated and excited that I won. But what about the people who didn't see their mob win? This became something that sat in the back of my mind for a while, but it started to creep further and further to the forefront, so much that I genuinely felt sad for the people whose mob lost, and very annoyed with Mojang for continuing this tradition. It almost felt like the sadness and frustration was really just lining the pockets of the developers, because these events brought a huge amount of publicity, and the drama from the idea of the loser mobs being gone forever was what really hyped it up. But the foundation for that hype was based on 1/3 of the people being happy because they got what they want, and 2/3 of the people who were angry and sad. Minecraft is supposed to be a game that makes you happy, and it started to feel like the way mob votes were handled broke the very spirit of that. Never did Mojang ever try to address this or give any mercy towards the people whose mob was gone forever. In a way, it felt like the death of a pet, which is something I recently went through. Maybe that was a big part of the reason why they ended it. Maybe they realized the monster that they had created and finally had the bravery to put a stop to it. Now, I don't want to end this video with all this doom and gloom, because it's this last controversy that really sort of changed a lot of what we thought about the mob votes and the possible future that they hold. Earlier this year, we were getting a new game drop for Minecraft. Basically, Minecraft shifted from doing large game updates that occur once a year to these smaller updates that occur multiple times per year, which are called game drops. In this game drop called the Age of Copper, we were shown a mob that we were all too familiar with. That's right, the Copper Golem was brought back from the void and actually became a real mob added to Minecraft. Not only that, this Copper Golem was not the same one that was part of the mob vote from 2021. This newer Copper Golem came with its own copper chest, and whatever items you put into the chest, the Copper Golem would walk over and place it in the regular chest with similar items. It basically was like its own little item sorter, and at that moment, everything changed. Sure, there are still lots of people who dislike the mob vote and how it was, but now that Mojang essentially lied to us, with a good lie in my opinion, this meant that any mob had the potential to come back. Although I think Mojang did make an official statement about this where they said that just because they added the copper golem, that did not mean that all the other mob vote mobs were going to be coming back. But in the statement they did say that there's always a possibility. But does this mean that the mob vote itself could come back? I think it's very possible. I don't know when, but I have a strong feeling that it will come back. Of course, I don't have any evidence at all of this, but I think at some point, money talks and BS walks. What do I mean by that? Well, if you were to look at the views of recent Minecraft lives without the mob votes compared to the Minecraft lives that did have mob votes, you'll see a very big difference. Both 2020 and 2021 have 10 million views, 2022 has 8 million, 2023 has 6 million, 2024 has 4.7 million, and if for some reason 2025's March Minecraft live has almost 9 million, but then the one in September has 3.6 million. It's definitely on a downward trend, and when that trend gets low enough, either investors or Microsoft will start to ask Mojang questions about why people are losing interest. And if they lied about the losers of the mob votes never returning, then what makes you think that they'll keep their word about canceling the mob vote? How many times have we seen companies get canceled over some sort of campaign where they got loads of backlash, only to spit out a ChatGPT apology, wait a year, and then do the exact same thing? All I'm saying is that money talks, so if the money starts to run dry, they'll do whatever they need to stay successful. So don't anybody lose hope. I'm sure we'll all see all of our favorite mob losers return to us very soon.
Just don't bring back the glare because I hate that stupid